Hey, it's Andrew back here at BTO Range. Today on the bench we have a little Smith Wesson revolver, a Smith Wesson Model 60. And yes, Model 60s are still in production today. This one is a little unusual. It has some unusual markings that we'll talk about. But the Model 60 itself is a pretty significant milestone in revolver history in general, not just Smith & Wesson history. It was introduced in 1965. And when it was introduced in 65, it was the first production revolver being made out of stainless steel. Now, obviously, the J frames had existed prior to that with the Model 36 Chief Special and the Chief Special Airweight, which became the Model 37. And if you had those revolvers and you wanted them with some type of corrosion-resistant finish, the typical go-to for that was the bright nickel finish. So Smith & Wesson had been working with some stainless steels for a little bit, and then they produced this revolver in 1965. Now, when they were first introduced, up until 1969, they were serialized with along with the Model 36. They didn't have their own serial numbers until 69, when they began serialization with the letter R as a prefix. And this is a 1978 gun, so we are an R prefix here with this gun on the serial number. So originally it obviously did not have these horrible crimson trace laser grips on it. They would have had the round butt wooden walnut magna style checkered grips. Until 1968, from introduction until 1968, those magna grips would have had the diamond inset around the grip screw. So those grips themselves are getting hard to find. If you have an early non-R prefix Model 60, then those magna grips with the diamond around the grip screw would be correct for that. So they started out with a serrated trigger. This gun has a serrated trigger on it. Later on in production, it would change to a smooth trigger. So let's talk about some of the production variations of this gun, and we'll talk about why this gun is a little bit unusual, a little bit more special than some of the others. So throughout its production, there have been specific short runs of Model 60s with special order features, whether they were ordered through a distributor, whether they were ordered by a police department. There have been production runs of the Model 60 with different features, such as the Model 60-1. And when we talk about dashes, and we'll go ahead and clear this gun out here. When we talk about dashes, we're talking about dashes appended to the model number, and the model designation is going to be in the frame cutout here where the yoke goes. And this one just says MOD 60. And then you may see some that'll say 60-1, 60-3, 60-10, that type of thing. So those dashes indicate some type of engineering change, and sometimes they indicate a special order run, such as the 60-1 that were done early on in the 70s. There were 171 of them produced with a 3-inch barrel, heavy barrel, square butt, adjustable sights. 171 of those produced. And then later on, there would be another set of these guns produced in 1985 in a similar configuration, about 660 of them for a distributor called Ashland Shooting Supplies. And those are in the 60-1 range also. So you have to look at the serial numbers to determine kind of where you are with that. But those bring a premium. In 1982 is when we see this pin delete right here, the pinned barrel. The pin barrel goes away in 1982. So a lot of collectors, Smith & Wesson in general, prefer the pinned barrel guns, and this would obviously certainly be one of those. So in '82 we see that happen, and then there are some additional model changes, and for example, the 60-2 was a New York City Police Department run, double action only, bobbed hammer. And you see some of those that are marked inside the crane, and we have some still pictures that I'm sure she's inserting into here, but it'll have an NY-1 hand stamped in the crane for those New York guns. And they had some problems with them, and they ended up sending a bunch of them back to Smith & Wesson, and they were reworked, rebarreled, and then sold commercially. So you may see a random 3-inch barrel Model 60 with an NY1 stamp on it, and that's one of those that has been rebarreled. All the NYC guns were 2-inch round butt guns. There was no variation to that. So anything other than that with an NY1 gun would be an after the fact. So it was rebarreled by the factory or by somebody else. So we do see some other target guns with adjustable sights, the 60-4, another limited run gun. And then there's some much later after we get into the current production and the later 90s and later production in the Model 60. So we do have a Ladysmith version of that starting in 1989. The 60-6 was a Ladysmith version with rosewood grips. And then we see the front sight come from this really narrow front sight to an 1/8-inch wide front sight with the 60-7. And then we end up lengthening even the frame. So when they get to the 60-9, they change the frame from the J frame to what was called the J Magnum frame, longer with a longer window here, a longer cylinder, and we start seeing the 357 Magnum introduction in that gun. So what makes this particular gun special is, and I think we've got a still photograph of that, and we've seen this a few times on these guns. We see the what looks like OHB stamped on the left side of the frame underneath that frame window, and I've seen probably 2 others of these in the past, and people had thought that there were somebody's initials that they'd stamped onto the gun or had cut onto the gun for whatever reason, but it's not. It looks like OHB. It originally was CHP, as in California Highway Patrol. So California Highway Patrol had been using revolvers, the Model 65s and the Model 60s. And throughout the 70s and 80s, and when they started transitioning to semi-automatic pistols, they traded these revolvers back in to distributors for resale, but they didn't want that CHP marking on the guns after that was gone from department hands. So the department, California Highway Patrol, overstamped the C and the P on the frame here. They overstamped it to where it looks like it says OHB, which was otherwise meaningless. So that's a known police marking, kind of a unique little weird story that obviously would have to come from California to be that weird. But so definitely it would be a police department type gun. So how do we evaluate this? Same way we do all the other guns we talk about: originality, condition, and scarcity, right? Model 60s themselves are not scarce just as a family, but there are specific submodels of the 60 that are. So obviously any of the police guns, the marked police guns, are scarcer. Some of obviously that 171 gun production of the 3-inch adjustable sight gun. The adjustable sight gun, the early one in general, whether it was Ashland Choose and Apply or whether it was one of the 171, those are scarce and command a premium. So if we just talk about a standard Model 60 that still has the original grips and not the laser grips, without any additional markings or additional features, it's going to trade in that $450 range to $500 range pretty reasonably. Now you start adding money for that scarcity with the police markings. This gun here, we expect this gun to be a $600 gun pretty much all day long because of that known overstamp CHP marking. The NY1 guns, if they're all original, will probably go in that range or possibly a little more because there are fewer of them. So boxed examples of these guns with the two-piece box on the early 60s, the pre-R prefix guns can reach well up over the $800 mark pretty easily. So even though the gun is still in production, the early guns and the small lot guns typically are going to bring a little bit more. So anyway, it's a Model 60. It's a neat little 38 revolver. Gosh, I've probably had Model 60s ever since the early 80s when I first really started getting into uh, the small little pistols like this. So uh, be aware of them. Don't just gloss them over if you see them in the used gun case of your gun store that you peruse. Those sleepers that are out there, you may be able to pick them up at a discounted price, and they're a rare gun that actually is worth quite a bit of money. So anyway, appreciate you watching. If you like what we're doing, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell to let you know when we post videos. We're going to try to start pushing out more and more of this stuff, and we'll see you on the next one.